How did a quiet widower walk into probate court, knowing the man who followed him was about to lose everything? Why did one warning in a dark parking lot turn grief into clarity, and clarity into action? This is how I learned who was watching me, and why I didn't look away. The third shift at Meridian Manufacturing wasn't where I planned to spend my 52nd year, but loss has a way of rewriting your schedule. After Helen passed away, home became a museum of memories I wasn't ready to revisit. The factory's humming machinery and fluorescent buzz offered something resembling peace, or at least distraction. My coworkers treated me like furniture, not maliciously, just practically. I was the systems supervisor who kept the production line running smooth, filed reports on time, and never caused drama. In the 3 months since I'd switched to nights, I'd become background noise in steel-toed boots. "Brooks, line 2's acting up again," called Martinez from across the floor, not bothering to look up from his clipboard. I nodded and headed over, muscle memory guiding me through diagnostics I could perform in my sleep. The conveyor belt had a sensor issue, 15 minutes, tops. As I worked, the familiar weight of invisibility settled around me like an old coat. During Helen's illness, I'd learned to become small, unnoticed, efficient. It was a skill that apparently transferred well to factory work. The shift ended at 2 a.m. While my colleagues headed to their cars in clusters, chatting about weekend plans and overtime hours, I gathered my things alone. This was when Marko appeared. Marko Ruiz had been working security at Meridian for 8 years. Mid-40s, compact build, with eyes that missed nothing. Unlike everyone else, Marko saw me. Not just my employee badge or my productivity reports. He saw me. "Another smooth night, Mr. Brooks?" he asked, falling into step beside me as I headed for the exit. "Smooth enough," I replied. It had become our routine. Marko would walk me to the parking lot, we'd exchange a few quiet words, and I'd leave him a glazed donut from the vending machine. Nothing dramatic, just 2 men acknowledging each other's existence in a world that had forgotten we were there. Tonight felt different, though. Marko's usual easy demeanor carried an edge of tension. His eyes swept the parking lot more carefully than usual, lingering on the shadows between the sodium lights. "Mr. Brooks," he said, his voice lower than normal, "I need you to listen to me carefully." I stopped walking, my hand halfway to my car keys. "What's wrong?" "There's been a car. Same one, 3 nights running. Dark sedan, license plate I can't quite make out from this distance. It parks over there." He nodded toward the far end of the lot. "And it watches." The October air suddenly felt colder. "Watches what?" "You." Marko's expression was serious, professional. "Driver stays in the car, engine running. When you leave, they follow. Not close, but they follow." My first instinct was to dismiss it. Paranoia was a luxury I couldn't afford, not when I was barely holding my life together with routine and willpower. But Marko wasn't the type to imagine things. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." He handed me the donut I'd left on the security desk. "Tonight, don't go straight home. Take the long way. See if I'm right." I looked across the parking lot, scanning for anything unusual. The shadows seemed deeper tonight, full of possibilities I didn't want to consider. "Marko, why would someone—" "I don't know," he said quietly, "but I know what I've seen. Be careful, Mr. Brooks." I drove home through side streets I hadn't used in years, checking my rearview mirror at every turn. At first, nothing. Then, 3 blocks from my house, I saw them. Headlights maintaining a careful distance, matching my turns with practiced precision. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Helen had been gone for 4 months. I was nobody special, just a widower trying to get through each day without falling apart. Who could possibly want to follow me? By the time I reached my driveway, the other car had vanished. But as I sat in my kitchen, staring at the donut I'd forgotten to give Marko, one thought kept circling through my mind. Someone was watching me, and they thought I didn't know. They were wrong. My house still smelled like Helen's lavender soap. 4 months later, her presence lingered in every corner, her coffee mug in the sink, her reading glasses on the nightstand, her half-finished crossword puzzle still folded on the kitchen table. I'd stopped trying to pack her things away. The grief counselor said I'd know when I was ready. I was beginning to think ready was a myth. The phone rang at 3:47 a.m., jarring me from restless half-sleep. For a moment, my heart leaped. Helen used to call when she couldn't sleep, back when the cancer treatments made her nights endless. But Helen wasn't calling anyone anymore. Unknown number glowed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. In the morning, there was no message. I made coffee in Helen's mug, a small rebellion against the counselor's advice about healthy boundaries, and tried to process what Marko had told me. Someone was watching me, following me. But why? I wasn't wealthy. Helen and I had lived comfortably but modestly, a paid-off house in a middle-class neighborhood, decent savings, nothing flashy. I didn't have enemies, didn't owe money, didn't know any secrets worth stealing. I was, by any reasonable measure, the most boring target imaginable, unless it wasn't about me at all. The thought hit me like cold water. What if this was about Helen, about what she'd left behind? I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, something I'd been avoiding for weeks. Helen's side of the bed was exactly as she'd left it. Romance novel bookmarked at chapter 12, water glass still sitting on the coaster, prescription bottles lined up like tiny soldiers on the nightstand. Her jewelry box sat on the dresser, velvet-lined compartments holding 40 years of accumulated treasures. Nothing valuable enough to destroy a life over, but perhaps valuable enough to draw unwanted attention. I opened her closet, breathing in the faint scent of her perfume, and began looking for anything I might have missed. That's when I found the folder. It was tucked behind a shoebox of old photos, manila and official looking. Estate planning documents was written on the tab in Helen's careful handwriting. Inside were papers I'd never seen before. Insurance policies, investment accounts, legal documents with letterheads I didn't recognize. And at the bottom, a note in Helen's handwriting. For Daren, in case something happens to me before I can explain. My hands shook as I read. Helen had been more financially savvy than I'd realized. Much more. The woman who'd clipped coupons and bought generic groceries had quietly built a portfolio worth nearly $500,000. Money I'd known nothing about, invested in accounts I'd never seen. The last document in the folder was a will. Not the simple one we'd written together years ago, but a new one, dated just 2 months before Helen's passing. It left everything to me, with one notable exception, a $50,000 bequest to Evan Hale, Helen's adopted son from her first marriage. Evan, who hadn't visited once during Helen's illness. Evan, who'd skipped her funeral. Evan, who hadn't called or texted since the day we'd told him about Helen's diagnosis. I sat on the bed, staring at the papers, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Evan had always been difficult. Not openly hostile, but never warm either. Even as a child, he'd watched Helen and me with calculating eyes, as if he were trying to figure out what we were worth to him. When he'd turned 18, he'd moved out and barely maintained contact. Holiday cards, occasional phone calls, the minimum effort required to stay in Helen's will. Helen had never said anything, but I'd seen the hurt in her eyes every Christmas when Evan made excuses not to visit. Now I wondered if his absence during her illness had been strategic rather than emotional. If he'd been waiting for the inevitable so he could claim his inheritance without having to pretend to grieve. But if that were true, why was someone following me now? Evan's bequest was clearly outlined in the will. He'd get his money, regardless of what happened to me, unless there was something else, something I hadn't found yet. I spent the rest of the morning going through Helen's papers with new eyes, looking for anything that might explain why I'd become a person of interest to someone with a dark sedan and too much patience. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Thinking of you during this difficult time. Hope you're taking care of yourself. E. Evan. After 4 months of silence, he was thinking of me. I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. But I saved the phone number. Something told me I was going to need it. That night, I went to work with new awareness. Every shadow in the parking lot could hide a watcher. Every car that passed the factory could be circling back. Marko was right. I was being followed. The question was whether my follower knew I'd figured it out. I decided to keep that information to myself for now. Let them think I was still the grieving widower, stumbling through his days in a haze of loss and routine. Let them think I was easy prey. Sometimes the best defense is looking defenseless. The next night, I changed my route home. Instead of taking my usual path down Industrial Boulevard, I turned left onto Maple Street, then right on Cedar, then left again on Oak. A meandering path through residential neighborhoods that would take me 20 minutes out of my way. The dark sedan followed every turn. They were good, maintaining distance, varying their position, never getting close enough for me to read the license plate. But they were there, a constant presence in my peripheral vision, and now I was certain this wasn't paranoia or coincidence. Someone was actively hunting me. I pulled into a 24-hour diner and sat in the parking lot, engine running, watching. The sedan drove past without slowing, but I caught a glimpse of the driver, young, male, wearing a baseball cap pulled low. Not close enough to identify, but close enough to confirm this was deliberate. My phone buzzed. Another text from Evan. Haven't heard from you. Just wanted to make sure you're okay. This must be such a hard time. I stared at the message, pieces clicking together in my mind. Evan texts me out of the blue after months of silence. Someone starts following me. Evan expresses concern for my well-being. The surveillance becomes more obvious, more aggressive. Either this was an incredible coincidence, or my stepson was checking up on his investment. I drove home slowly, taking my usual route this time. The sedan picked me up again 2 blocks from the diner, following at a comfortable distance until I pulled into my driveway. They drove past without stopping, but I noticed something I'd missed before. They knew exactly where I lived. No hesitation, no slowing down to check house numbers. They'd done this before. Inside my house, I sat at the kitchen table with Helen's estate documents spread in front of me, trying to understand the game being played around me. The will was clear. Evan got $50,000. I got everything else. But there had to be more to it, something that made me a target instead of just an obstacle. I found it in the fine print of Helen's investment accounts. The money wasn't just left to me, it came with specific conditions. If I were gone within 2 years of Helen's passing, and if there were no other heirs, the entire estate would transfer to her surviving family members. Since Helen had no biological children and her parents were long gone, that meant Evan, all of it, nearly $500,000, plus the house, plus Helen's life insurance policy, but only if I was gone within the next 20 months. I leaned back in my chair, understanding flooding through me like ice water. Evan wasn't just mourning his adoptive mother's passing, he was waiting for mine. The $50,000 bequest was a consolation prize. The real money was in the contingency clause, the legal loophole that turned my disappearance into his windfall. My phone rang. Evan's number. "Hello, Daren." His voice was smooth, practiced. "I've been worried about you." "Have you?" "Of course. I know how much you loved Mom, and I know how hard this must be. Are you taking care of yourself? Eating enough? Getting enough sleep?" Each question felt like a probe, testing my mental state, my vulnerability. "I'm managing." "That's good to hear. I was thinking, maybe I should come visit." check on you in person, make sure you're really okay. The offer made my skin crawl. That's not necessary. I think it is. His tone shifted slightly, became more insistent. Your family, Daren. You're all the family I have left. I can't just leave you alone to struggle through this. I said I'm fine. But are you really? Working those late shifts, driving home alone at all hours? It's not safe. Anything could happen. Car accidents, break-ins, medical emergencies. Who would even know if something happened to you? There it was. Not quite a threat, but close enough. A reminder of how isolated I was, how vulnerable, how easy it would be for something to happen to me. I appreciate your concern, I said carefully, but I'm doing better than you might think. I hope so, I really do. But promise me something, Daren. Promise me you'll be careful. The world can be a dangerous place, especially for someone who's distracted by grief. After he hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the phone, understanding exactly what kind of game we were playing now. Evan wasn't just waiting for me to be gone. He was actively pushing things in that direction. The surveillance wasn't about collecting information. It was about studying my patterns, my weak points, my routines. They were closing in on me, and they wanted me to feel it. But there was something they didn't know about me, something Helen's passing had taught me. Grief doesn't make you weak. It makes you patient. It teaches you to endure, to observe, to wait for the right moment, to act. Evan thought he was stalking a broken widower stumbling through his days in a haze of loss. He had no idea he was actually circling a man who'd spent 4 months learning how to be invisible, how to watch without being watched, how to plan without being detected. Tomorrow night, I would start documenting everything. Every car that followed me, every phone call, every text message. I would build a case so solid that when I finally decided to act, there would be no doubt about what had been happening. Evan wanted to play a waiting game? Fine. But he was about to learn that some prey bite back. The next evening, I approached Marko differently. Instead of our usual casual exchange, I asked him to step into the security office where we could talk privately. You were right about the car, I told him without preamble. They followed me home last night. Same car, same driver. Marko's expression hardened. You get a look at the license plate? Partial. Starts with HVR, but I couldn't make out the rest. It was a lie. I hadn't gotten that close, but I wanted to see if Marko had better information. HVR 4429, he said immediately. I got the full number 2 nights ago when they parked under the light near the dumpster. Been meaning to run it through the system, but I wanted to talk to you first. I felt a surge of gratitude toward this quiet man who'd been protecting me without being asked. What did you find? Registered to a rental company, Enterprise over on 5th Street, rented 3 weeks ago under the name E. Hale. The confirmation hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd been expecting it. Hearing Evan's name connected to the surveillance made it real in a way that speculation couldn't. You know this guy? Marko asked, watching my reaction. He's my stepson. The words tasted bitter. My late wife's adopted son. Marko nodded slowly, understanding passing between us without need for explanation. Family money, family betrayal, family hunting family. What do you want to do about it? For now, keep documenting, keep watching. Let me handle the rest. The next morning, I drove to First National Bank, where Helen and I had maintained our accounts for 20 years. I asked to speak with someone about estate matters, and they directed me to Mrs. Patterson, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and 20 years of experience with grieving spouses. I'm trying to understand my late wife's financial arrangements, I explained. There seemed to be some accounts I wasn't aware of. Mrs. Patterson pulled up Helen's records, her expression growing more serious as she scrolled through the information. Mr. Brooks, I need to tell you something. Someone accessed information about these accounts 3 weeks ago. Accessed how? They came in person, claiming to be family, had identification, knew enough personal details to seem legitimate. We gave them general information about the estate structure, but nothing specific about amounts or account numbers. What name did they give? She checked her notes. Evan Hale, listed himself as Mrs. Brooks's son. 3 weeks ago. Right around the time the rental car was registered, right around the time the surveillance began. Evan had been planning this carefully, gathering intelligence, preparing for whatever came next. Is there anything else I should know? I asked. Mrs. Patterson hesitated. Mr. Brooks, the person who came in, they asked specifically about contingency clauses in the estate planning, about what would happen if something were to happen to you. I thanked her and left the bank with a clearer picture of what I was dealing with. Evan wasn't just hoping for me to be gone, he was actively researching the legal mechanics around it, making sure he understood exactly how to benefit when it happened. That afternoon, I called Laura Finch, the estate attorney, whose name I'd found in Helen's papers. Her secretary scheduled me for an appointment the following day, but when I mentioned it was regarding Helen Brooks' estate and some urgent concerns about potential fraud, Laura herself came on the line. Mr. Brooks, I've been hoping to hear from you. There are some things about your wife's estate that we need to discuss immediately. What kind of things? The kind that are better discussed in person. Can you come in today? An hour later, I sat in Laura Finch's office, a tastefully appointed space with law books and family photos, while she explained exactly how much danger I was in. Your wife was very specific about the contingency clauses, Laura said, spreading documents across her desk. She was concerned about Evan's motivations. She wanted to make sure he received something, but she also wanted to protect you. Protect me from what? From exactly what's happening now. Laura pointed to a clause I'd missed in my initial reading. If you pass away within 2 years of Helen's passing, Evan inherits everything, but only if it appears to be unforeseen or natural. If there's any evidence of wrongdoing, if anyone is found responsible for your passing, the entire estate goes to charity. I stared at the document, understanding dawning. She knew. She suspected. Evan had been asking questions about inheritance, about what would happen if something happened to both of you. Helen was a smart woman, Mr. Brooks. She built in protections. But if he makes it look like an accident, then he gets everything, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. Laura leaned forward. Mr. Brooks, I need to ask you directly. Do you believe you're in immediate danger? I thought about the surveillance, the phone calls, the rental car registered in Evan's name. Yes, I do. Then we need to act fast. There are legal steps we can take, but we need evidence, documentation, proof of what's happening. I told her about Marko's observations, about the rental car, about Evan's sudden interest in my well-being. Laura took notes, asked questions, and by the end of our meeting, we had the beginnings of a plan. The probate hearing for Helen's estate is scheduled for next week, she said. Evan will have to appear to claim his bequest. That gives us a deadline and an opportunity. What kind of opportunity? Laura smiled. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I had an ally who understood the game being played. The kind where the hunter becomes the hunted. I spent the next 3 days becoming someone I'd never been before, methodical, paranoid, and quietly dangerous. Every morning, I documented the previous night's surveillance, timestamps, locations, license plate confirmations. Marko provided security camera footage from the factory parking lot, showing the same rental car appearing night after night, always positioned to watch my exit. Every evening, I recorded my phone calls with Evan. His concern for my well-being had become a daily ritual, each conversation a masterclass in manufactured worry. Daren, you sound tired, he said during Tuesday's call. Are you sure you're getting enough sleep? Maybe you should see a doctor. Sometimes grief can manifest as physical symptoms. I'm fine, Evan. But are you really? I've been reading about widower syndrome. Did you know that men who lose their wives have significantly higher rates of heart attacks, strokes, accidents? It's like the body just gives up. Each suggestion felt like a threat wrapped in false concern. Heart attacks could be induced, strokes could be triggered, accidents could be arranged. "I appreciate you looking out for me," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Of course, your family, and honestly I've been thinking, maybe it would be better if you weren't working those late shifts. Driving home alone at night, working with dangerous machinery when you're emotionally compromised, it seems risky. The work helps me cope. I understand, but what if something happened? What if you had an accident at the factory or on the drive home? Who would even know until the next day?" There it was again. The reminder of how isolated I was. How easy it would be for something to happen without witnesses. But Evan didn't know about Marko, didn't know about the security cameras, didn't know about Laura Finch or the legal protections Helen had built into her will. He thought he was stalking a broken man stumbling through his grief alone. Wednesday night, the surveillance escalated. Instead of maintaining their usual distance, the rental car followed me more aggressively, pulling up beside me at red lights, making sure I could see the driver clearly. It was Evan. He didn't acknowledge me, didn't wave or signal, just sat in the driver's seat of the rental car, letting me know he was there, letting me know he was in control. The message was clear. I see you, I know your patterns, and there's nothing you can do about it. I drove home slowly, checking my mirrors, while Evan followed openly now. No more pretense, no more careful distance. He was done being subtle. At home, I called Laura Finch. "He's getting impatient," I told her. "The surveillance is becoming harassment." "That's good," she said, which surprised me. "Impatience leads to mistakes. How's your documentation coming?" I looked at the folders spread across my kitchen table, photos, recordings, timestamps, witness statements from Marko. "I think we have enough." "Not quite yet. We need him to make a move, something concrete we can present to the court, something that shows intent." "What if his move involves me not being here anymore?" "It won't, because tomorrow we're going to change the rules of the game." Thursday morning, Laura filed preliminary paperwork with the probate court requesting an expedited review of Helen's estate due to concerns about beneficiary conduct and potential fraud. The hearing was moved up to Friday afternoon. Evan would receive official notification Thursday evening, less than 24 hours to prepare, to panic, to make the kind of desperate move that would give us everything we needed. I went to work Thursday night knowing it might be my last shift at Meridian Manufacturing. Not because I was planning to quit, but because by tomorrow evening, either Evan would be in police custody or I would be gone. Marko was waiting for me in the parking lot. "Got something for you," he said, handing me a manila envelope. "Security footage from the past week, every night, every angle. Your boy's been careless." I looked through the photos, clear shots of Evan in the rental car, timestamps proving the pattern of surveillance, evidence that would be impossible to explain away as coincidence. "Marko," I said, "if something happens to me—" "Nothing's going to happen to you," he said firmly. "But if someone tries, they're going to have to go through me first." I felt a surge of emotion that surprised me. For months, I'd been alone with my grief, invisible to everyone around me. But Marko saw me. Laura believed in me. Even in the darkest moment of my life, I wasn't as isolated as Evan thought. Friday morning, I received 3 phone calls from Evan. I let them all go to voicemail. "Daren, I just got some confusing paperwork from a lawyer. Something about Mom's estate. I don't understand what's happening. Call me back." "Daren, this is serious. There's going to be a hearing this afternoon?" "About what? Why wasn't I consulted? We need to talk." "Daren, I'm coming over. We need to discuss this face to face. This is family business, and families should stick together." I didn't call him back. Instead, I drove to the courthouse, arriving 2 hours early for the 3 p.m. hearing. Laura was already there, organizing documents, preparing for battle. "Ready?" she asked. I thought about Helen, about the life we'd built together, about the quiet man I'd been before grief taught me how to fight back. "Ready?" At 2:45, Evan walked into the courthouse waiting area. He looked around, spotted me sitting calmly with my lawyer, and his face went through a series of expressions: confusion, anger, and finally, calculation. He sat down across from me, and for the first time in months, we looked directly at each other. "Hello, Evan," I said quietly. "What the hell is this, Daren?" "This," I said, "is the end of the game." Evan's face went through a remarkable transformation as he processed what he was seeing. The confused concern melted away, replaced by something cold and calculating that I'd never seen before. Or maybe I'd just never been looking for it. "You think you're clever," he said quietly, leaning forward in his chair. "You think you've figured something out. I think I've figured out exactly what you've been doing for the past 3 weeks. He glanced around the courthouse waiting area, noting the other people within earshot, and forced his expression back into something resembling concern, but his eyes stayed hard. "Daren, I don't know what kind of paranoid fantasy you've constructed, but HVR 4429, I said simply. The rental car license plate. Evan's face went very still. "I don't know what that means." "It means you've been following me, every night for 3 weeks. It means you've been documenting my routines, my schedule, my vulnerabilities. It means you've been planning something." Evan sat back, and for a moment I saw the real him. Not the concerned stepson, not the grieving adopted child, but the calculating figure who'd been watching me closely since Helen passed away. "You can't prove anything," he said. "Actually, I can. Security footage, witness statements, rental agreements, your bank inquiries about the estate, your very convenient concern for my health and safety." I kept my voice level, conversational. "The question is, what were you planning to do with all that information?" "I was worried about you. Is that a crime?" "Stalking is." Laura appeared beside us, her presence immediately shifting the dynamic. "Mr. Hale, I'm Laura Finch, the estate attorney. We'll be starting in just a few minutes." Evan looked between us, understanding that this wasn't a coincidence, that we'd been planning this confrontation as carefully as he'd been planning whatever came next. "This is insane," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Daren, you're my family. You're all the family I have left. Why would I want to hurt you?" $450,000, I said quietly. "Plus the house, plus Helen's life insurance. That's why." The color drained from Evan's face. He hadn't known I'd uncovered the contingency clause, hadn't realized I understood the full scope of what he stood to gain if I were no longer around. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. Helen passes away. I'm grieving and isolated, working risky late shifts and driving home alone every night. A perfect setup for something to go wrong. A sudden medical emergency from stress. A wreck on a dark road. An incident at the plant. So many ways for a broken widower to disappear." Evan's mask finally slipped completely. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Then explain it to me. Explain why you rented a car under your own name to follow me. Explain why you've been calling every day asking about my health, my sleep, my emotional state. Explain why you suddenly care about my well-being after ignoring Helen's entire illness." "She never wanted me there," he said, and for the first time, real emotion crept into his voice. "She made it clear I wasn't welcome. You both did." "That's not true, isn't it? The perfect little family, playing house while the real son gets pushed aside. Do you know how many times she called me during the cancer? 0. Do you know how many times you called? 0. But now that she's gone, now that there's money involved, suddenly I'm supposed to care about your grief." His voice was rising, drawing attention from other people in the waiting area. Laura put a gentle hand on my arm, a reminder to stay calm. "Helen left you $50,000, I said. "That's not nothing." "50,000? Evan laughed bitterly. "A consolation prize. A pat on the head for the adopted kid. While you get everything else. The house she lived in before she even met me. The money she saved before you existed. Everything that should have been mine. So you decided to take it. I decided to wait. To see if grief would do what it does to most widowers. And if it didn't." He shrugged. "Well, sometimes grief needs a little help." The admission hung in the air between us. Not quite a confession, but close enough. "Mr. Hale," Laura said firmly, "I think you should speak with your attorney before this conversation goes any further." "I don't need an attorney. I haven't done anything wrong. Yet." The word "yet" sent a chill through me. This wasn't over. Even with the hearing, even with the evidence, Evan wasn't backing down. He was escalating. A bailiff appeared. "Brooks Estate hearing, courtroom 3. As we stood to go inside, Evan moved close to me, close enough that only I could hear his whisper. "This isn't over, Daren. You can't watch your back forever. And when something happens to you, and it will happen, no one will be able to prove it wasn't just another grieving widower who couldn't handle the loss." He straightened up, his public mask sliding back into place. "I hope we can work this out like family," he said loudly enough for others to hear. That's what Mom would have wanted. But I'd heard the real message. The threat was still active, the hunting was still happening. And now that I'd forced him into the open, Evan was going to become desperate. Desperate prey was the most dangerous kind. As we walked into the courtroom, I realized that today wasn't going to end this. It was only going to make Evan more determined to finish what he'd started. The real confrontation was still coming. The probate hearing lasted 43 minutes and changed everything. Judge Martinez was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who'd clearly seen every type of family dispute imaginable. She listened to Laura's presentation with the weary attention of someone who'd heard too many stories about money turning relatives into enemies. "Mrs. Finch, you're alleging that the beneficiary has engaged in stalking and harassment of the primary inheritor?" "Yes, Your Honor. We have documentation of systematic surveillance, threatening communications, and what appears to be preparation for some form of harm to my client." Laura presented our evidence methodically. The security footage, Marko's witness statement, the rental car records, transcripts of Evan's phone calls. Each piece built on the last, creating a picture of predatory behavior that was impossible to dismiss. Evan's court-appointed attorney, he'd requested one after our confrontation in the waiting area, tried to frame everything as concern for a grieving family member. But the evidence was too clear, too systematic. "Mr. Hale," Judge Martinez said finally, "do you have any explanation for renting a vehicle and using it to follow Mr. Brooks on multiple occasions?" "I was worried about him," Evan said. "He seemed unstable, emotionally compromised. I wanted to make sure he was safe. By following him without his knowledge or consent, I didn't want to upset him by being too direct about my concerns." Judge Martinez looked skeptical. "And the inquiries you made at the bank about contingency clauses in the estate?" "I wanted to understand my mother's wishes." "Your adoptive mother's wishes were quite clear, Mr. Hale. She left you a substantial bequest while protecting her husband from exactly the kind of behavior you've been exhibiting." The judge's ruling was swift and comprehensive. Evan's $50,000 bequest was suspended pending investigation of his conduct. A restraining order was issued, prohibiting him from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of my home or workplace. Most importantly, Detective Paulson from the county sheriff's office was officially notified of the situation and asked to investigate potential stalking charges. As we left the courthouse, Evan's mask finally fell away completely. "You think you've won," he said, as the bailiff escorted him out. You think some piece of paper is going to protect you. But accidents happen, Daren, every day. And when yours happens, no one will be able to prove it wasn't just bad luck. Detective Paulson, a methodical man in his 50s, took detailed notes as Laura and I explained the situation. He promised to follow up on the stalking charges and suggested I take extra precautions for my safety. Restraining orders are just paper, he said bluntly. They don't stop bullets or brake failures or house fires. You need to be smart about this. I drove home that evening, knowing that I'd won a battle, but not the war. Evan was cornered now, legally and financially. His inheritance was frozen, his behavior was officially documented, and he was facing potential criminal charges, which made him infinitely more dangerous. At home, I called Marko to update him on the hearing. It's not over, I told him. He's going to try something else. I figured as much. Want me to keep an eye on things? If you can, but be careful. He knows about you now. That night, I didn't go to work. For the first time in months, I stayed home, checking locks, closing curtains, and thinking about what Evan might do next. The restraining order meant he couldn't follow me openly anymore, couldn't call me, couldn't approach me directly. But it didn't stop him from hiring someone else to do those things. It didn't prevent accidents that couldn't be traced back to him. It didn't protect me from the kind of carefully planned tragedy that would look like bad luck to everyone except the person who'd arranged it. I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by Helen's estate documents, and realized that tomorrow would likely bring the real test. Evan was desperate now, boxed in with his inheritance frozen and legal charges looming. He had nothing left to lose and everything to gain from me no longer being around. The phone rang at 11:47 p.m. Unknown number. I answered it, expecting Evan's voice despite the restraining order. Instead, I heard breathing. Slow, deliberate, patient. I know you're there, I said. The breathing continued for another 30 seconds, then the call cut off. It rang again 5 minutes later. Same pattern, breathing, silence, disconnect, and again at midnight, and 12:15 and 12:30, sleep harassment, psychological warfare, ways to break down my defenses without technically violating the restraining order. Evan was adapting, finding new ways to hunt me within the legal constraints he now faced. I unplugged the landline and turned off my cell phone. But as I lay in bed, listening to every sound the old house made, I knew that silence wouldn't protect me for long. Evan was out there somewhere, planning his next move, and this time he wouldn't make the mistake of being subtle about it. The real confrontation was coming, and only one of us was going to walk away from it. I woke up Saturday morning to find my car's brake lines cut. The discovery came when I went to move the car from the driveway to the garage, a simple maneuver that nearly ended with me crashing through Mrs. Henderson's fence. The pedal went straight to the floor, no resistance, no stopping power. I sat in the car for a long moment, understanding exactly what had nearly happened. If I'd been driving to work, taking the winding road down from the hills where I lived, the brake failure would have sent me over the guardrail and into the ravine. Another grieving widower, gone in what would have looked like a tragic accident. I called Detective Paulson first, then Laura Finch, then a tow truck. By noon, my driveway was full of police cars and forensic technicians documenting what was clearly a deliberate and dangerous act meant to cause serious harm. Clean cut, the forensics tech told Detective Paulson. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. Professional job. Paulson looked grim. Any security cameras in the neighborhood? Mrs. Henderson has one that covers part of my driveway, I said. Motion activated. The footage was grainy but clear enough. 3:17 a.m., a figure in dark clothing approaching my car, working underneath it for approximately 8 minutes, then disappearing back into the shadows. The face wasn't visible, but the build and movement were familiar. That's him, I told Paulson. That's Evan. Can you prove it in court? I studied the footage again. The figure was the right height, the right build, moved with Evan's particular gait. but his face was hidden, and a good defense attorney could argue it could have been anyone. Maybe not beyond reasonable doubt, I admitted. Then we need more. Laura had been quiet during the police investigation, but as the crime scene team packed up their equipment, she pulled me aside. "This changes things," she said. "An attempt on your life overrides inheritance disputes. We can move to have Evan's bequest permanently revoked. Will that stop him? It might make him desperate enough to make a bigger mistake." That afternoon, Laura filed an emergency motion with the probate court, citing the brake line incident as evidence of Evan's escalating dangerous behavior. Judge Martinez scheduled a hearing for Monday morning and issued a warrant for Evan's arrest on stalking and serious felony charges related to the incident. Sunday passed quietly, too quietly. No mysterious phone calls, no signs of surveillance, no further sabotage attempts. Evan had gone to ground, which somehow felt more ominous than his previous open threats. Monday morning, I arrived at the courthouse to find Evan already in custody. He'd been arrested at his apartment Sunday night, and according to Detective Paulson, he'd been carrying detailed floor plans of my house, my work schedule, and what appeared to be notes about various accident scenarios. The hearing was brief, but decisive. Judge Martinez listened to the evidence, reviewed the police reports, and made her ruling without hesitation. "Mr. Hale, your behavior has escalated from concerning to criminal. Your bequest from Helen Brooks's estate is hereby permanently revoked. All funds will instead be donated to the charity specified in Mrs. Brooks' will for exactly this contingency." Evan's face went white. "You can't do that. That money is mine. She was my mother. She was your adoptive mother, and she was wise enough to protect her husband from exactly the kind of behavior you've demonstrated. Furthermore, you're being bound over for trial on charges of stalking and a serious felony related to intent to cause harm." As the bailiff led Evan away, he turned back to look at me one last time. The calculation was gone from his eyes, replaced by raw fury. "This isn't over," he said. "Even if I'm locked away, this isn't over." But it was over. I could see it in Judge Martinez's expression, in Detective Paulson's satisfied nod, in Laura's relieved smile. The system had done what it was supposed to do. The evidence was undeniable. Accountability had finally caught up. 3 weeks later, Evan entered a guilty plea to stalking and the serious felony charges in exchange for a 15-year sentence. The hearing was brief and procedural, almost anticlimactic after everything that had come before. Leaving the courthouse for the final time, I realized I wasn't looking over my shoulder anymore. I wasn't checking my mirrors or waiting for threatening calls. The hunting was over. That evening, I returned to Meridian Manufacturing for my final shift. I'd given my notice the week before, not out of fear, but because I was ready to move forward. Marko was waiting in the parking lot, as always. "Heard it's your last night. Time for something new?" I handed him a glazed donut. "Thank you for everything. Just doing my job. No, you saw me when no one else did. You protected me before I knew I needed it." He nodded. "What's next?" I looked around the lot where this nightmare had begun, with a warning about a car watching me. Helen's estate was settled. The danger had passed. For the first time since she was gone, I could finally breathe. "I'm thinking about traveling," I said. Helen wanted to see Ireland. Maybe I'll go for both of us. Driving home that night, without fear or second thoughts, I thought about the man I'd been at the start, grieving, invisible, surviving on routine. That man was gone. Grief hadn't weakened me. It had taught me patience. Being underestimated had become an advantage. Sometimes the best defense is letting your enemy believe they're winning until they aren't. Evan thought he was hunting a broken widower. Instead, he awakened something in me, the ability to endure, to plan, to win. The house was quiet when I got home, but peaceful now. I made coffee in Helen's mug, sat at the kitchen table where everything had changed, and searched for flights to Dublin. It was time to start living again.